We're live. Are we live? We're live. Hello all. Welcome to a men's mental health panel, including Andrea, of course. How are we all?
Good.
Yeah.
All good. All good from Australia.
I know. Yeah, thanks for getting up again, Alan. I know. I need to come back on the campfire at some point.
Yeah, I've got to start running some more panel discussions on there shortly. It's just we've had so much work with the Business of Smiles and working with the clients. Not enough hours in the day.
Absolutely. Long time no see anyway, Joey.
Hey, I'm excited to be here. I've had a little hiatus for the past year or so, but I'm ready to dive in and go, guys and ladies.
I'm just one of the guys. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, well, last week I got called Alan, and Aladdin. I don't know why. So I could be anyone. I don't know. How are you, David?
Doing well. Doing very well. Things are good. Work-wise, art-wise, mental health-wise, things are pretty good.
Awesome. Yeah, so I thought we'd kickstart by talking about self-empowerment within men. So obviously, I want to kickstart with you, Andrea. What do you think it should take for men to start talking more and to empower themselves?
Absolutely, and I'm glad you mentioned that. So just to kind of a little bit backstory, this is perfect because I just did a group live on my end of empowerment this week, but I grew up with 7 male cousins, so I had a strong male influence, and I learned a lot, probably more than any female should at a young age. But empowerment with men, I believe it, as Adam says, it starts within. Empowering yourself that, we put these barriers, these stigmatism, these labels on men that they're supposed to be the warriors, the strong one, the one who, kills the spider, the one who, puts, blocks the way so so a lady can pass. But who is empowering them? For those men who, whether regardless of the power of their strength of their patriarchs in their lives, some don't have fathers in their lives because they're labor workers or workers. Others have fathers who were just kind of like, you're seen and not heard. But I believe it starts within. I think men should really say, okay, let me look at my environment and see the male figures in my environment, whether it be the cartoons as a kid growing up, those heroes that they talk about, the coaches in your life, or the patriarch, like I said, of the older gentleman in your life. First, to empower men, I really believe it's important carving out an identity. Who's the man you want to be? Who's the man you are? And break away from society's definition of men. That's how I would start off. That's how I see it from, like I said, being raised. I had a mom and dad, but I said my familial friends, my social networks were 7 cousins. So I really got a lot to learn through them. So that's how I would start it off. Empowerment with men is really looking inside, enlightening themselves, creating identity of who they want to be, who they are, and who they shouldn't be based on their patriarchal figures in there. And if there aren't any, you have men who grew up with only mothers raising them. And that's difficult for any woman to raise a son, whether you're married or not. It's really difficult. So that's where I would start, Adam.
Absolutely. And thanks for your feedback. And obviously, Alan, as a profound communication specialist, anything to add on to that?
Yeah, well, first thing I'd add to it is that the only one who can empower the male is the man himself. Nobody else can do that. The rest of us have a responsibility to create an environment where they're able to do that. They can give themselves permission to do it. Because at the end of the day, we look at it and to do any other way is about ego, personal ego. For each if we want a better society, then we have to take that responsibility on and set the environment up so that men can then open up. You know, in the Campfire Project, they're the conversations we've had. Men have come in, we've created a safe place. They've been able to share their stories about what they've been through. And through that, we've seen them grow. They've empowered themselves. And it's a privilege to sit there and listen to anybody tell their life story and open up. And it's, you know, it's a real privilege to have be put in that position where somebody honours you enough to open up and tell you their story. And in that, you can see them growing very quickly. And that's what it comes down to. We have to create the safe place so that they can then, you know, empower themselves. Because empowerment, like inspiration, comes from within. It doesn't come from without.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because obviously I know people have labelled only June as Men's Mental Health Month, but every day is that. Every day is every awareness, but it's putting these labels on things, and it's like that could be the major source to where these triggers are actually coming from. I'm probably wrong.
Well, one of the things that Andrea mentioned was that, you know, about boys that grow up without a father. We know that the most violent crimes committed against women come from males who didn't have a father. Broken marriages, and with first marriages around about 50% failing, second marriages at about 77% and 67% failure, and third marriages at 73% failure rate. And no man in the house, the boys don't learn what it is to respect women. I raised 3 boys on my own, and even though their mother left, the main thing was to teach them to respect their mother, and then respect them, because otherwise they wouldn't respect other women. So if we want a better society, it always comes back to all of us working together, which is why I create the hashtag We Together.
Exactly, yeah.
And I'd like to also add in too, you know, I'm going to get backlash from my female counterparts and community, but I feel from my experience too, women kind of take advantage of that to a certain extent, because they know they can push men to certain limits, and then for whatever reason, not every woman, not all situations, but sometimes we push the envelope, push them to the point of frustration where men only know how to fight or flight and explode. And then that's when the repercussions happen for the men getting violent, anger, or agitated, which can be at certain times stimulated or triggered by women's conditions. Now, ladies, I'm not saying we are all the time, but I know I do it sometimes too. I push the buttons and then get them to the point of no return, and you get that fear factor, but at the same token, they don't know how to handle their emotions. Men are not conditioned properly in society on how to express their emotions. They're seen as soft. They're seen as, you know, have more feminine qualities. That's not a quality. It's a trait, or it's a how would you can't think of the word off at the top of my head. Maybe Alan, you could help me.
Yeah, well,
but it's just a response or a reaction that they have. And I think as women, we must be mindful of that when we are dealing with our spouses or men, that they see, some men see it all or nothing. There's no gray side to it. And if we don't allow them to see that, they explode.
it's in the boardroom, men rule. We always have, we always will. And that's because it's a place that we feel safe. Outside, though, women rule when it comes to talking about emotions and gathering together and talking. And this is where the issue is. You know, in the boardroom, we need to listen to the women. We need to bring their energy into the boardroom to bring something greater into there. But in the community, if women have the gift of being able to speak, because you have emotional empathy at a higher level than males, as far as being able to express it. Whereas males, we are compassionate empathy. We want to fix the problem, because we're highly emotional, but the problem is that we don't know how to handle it. So we want to move away from it as fast as we possibly can and give it back to, just fix the problem. So where men can open up, and then, as we've seen on the Campfire Project, the women started sending me messages saying they love the guys because they opened up so deeply about their emotions. And then the women were able to hear how wise they could speak about how we could improve society. And so it's changing that. Men need to recognise, the woman needs to feel her emotions. We need to recognise the emotional empathy, and we go, right, we can feel it. But, How can we then move forward, and how can we help you? A case of, do you want us to listen, or do you want us to fix the problem? And if a woman says she just wants us to listen, we listen, because it's got nothing to do with us. It's something that they need to express. If they want us to fix it, well, it's either something they see we have the power to fix, or we screwed up in the first place and they want us to fix that. That's okay. It's having that conversation, but we've just got this separation line, and we don't come across into each other's areas. We do that, we'll find things change a lot. Men have got so much emotion inside of them, but when they can't express themselves, it's going to come out physically. And that's where the problem comes in. And you mentioned before, and I want the listeners to recognize this as well, that when we look at the, as you said there before, about not speaking, we're talking generally. It's the only way we can talk in a conversation here. We can't be specific. So for some people, be getting their buttons pushed about now. But it's a case of realizing, step out of that. It's nothing to do with you as an individual. We're talking about the general side of things. I'm sorry, I'd like to hear from David and Joey, what they think.
Yeah.
Well, Alan, one thing that you mentioned when you said that you model for your boys how to respect women and their mother, are you also able to help model for them how to deal with emotions and things like that as well? Because growing up, I didn't have a good model for dealing with emotions. My father was he was emotional, but he couldn't express things like sadness, grief, things like that. It would always come out as anger. And I didn't have a good example of how to, I had to learn on my own, just through therapy and practices and things like that, how to deal with emotions. So I just wonder, I have two boys, and I've tried to do my best, but, I was learning as I was going, because I didn't have a father figure that kind of taught me how to deal with emotions well. So.
Yeah, see, my father died when I was 3. And I had no real male role models in my life. My uncle told my fiance at our engagement party she could do better than me. That's what I grew up with. So I had to learn all this stuff myself. I'm in my 70s now, and it took me a long time to get to this point. For a man to be able to help his son through the emotions, the really scary part is the man's going to have to deal with his first.
Yeah.
So once we learn how to deal with ours, now we know what we've been through. Now we've got the experience. Like you said, David, you had to learn this yourself. So you're probably going to be, for your own children, you're the one who is the most gifted to be able to help them, because the experience, you can learn stuff from textbooks. You can talk to psychologists, and they can read all and have all the information. But if they haven't had any life experiences, all they're doing is regurgitating somebody else's opinion, not their own experiences. And their experiences are the most powerful thing. Now, I'm a profiler. I've done just about every modality you can think of. I've been to university. I've done all sorts of things, but my greatest learning has come from my life experiences. And so,
absolutely.
And this is
what do you think, Joey?
Is listening to this. Whatever you've been through, think about what was the upside of what you've been through. How can you take those lessons and then teach your family, teach your kids? Because the best guide, and by the way, a man's job is not to make a man of his son. The man's job is to get him ready for manhood, and that's why having other men around him as well. Because if not, the son becomes a clone of his dad. Whereas if he has other men, the boy can look at the other men and take a little bit of each of them and create his own character, which is uniquely different to everybody else on the planet, and therefore has value as he steps from boyhood into manhood from that moment on as a man.
I can totally relate to that, Alan. And yeah, sorry, I've got a terrible delay, so I hope that this is coming through okay and you can hear me all right. But I can totally relate to everything you guys are talking about, because I was abandoned at birth by my biological father. And I didn't even have a father figure until my stepdad came into the picture around 7 or 8 years old, and God love him. He's done everything he can for me in life, but he was the worst role model when it came to masculinity and just showing me how to grow up without. His temper was so bad. He wasn't abusive. He he raged at everything, and he's learned to calm himself down over the years and doesn't get so volatile. But I've discovered through all of my work, all of my healing, and everything I've done, that our true power as a man comes from our self-control. They breed us, they make us feel like masculinity is so wrong and it's so harmful, and that's bullshit. At the end of the day, we have to have the masculinity just as much as we have to have the femininity. But I feel like that true power comes when we, as masculine men, can hold back, can have that self-control, and it's only at the times that it has to come out as that protective nature or that instinctual nature. I think that self-control is the power and the key to all of it. And it's taken me years and years to learn self-control. I was a spitting image of my stepfather for almost all of my life, up until just the last 3-4 years. I've done so much work. I've learned to now take a breath. I've learned to not get upset about those things I can't control, which used to just flip me out. And I don't know how many times I've broken my hand punching things, and just uncontrolled rage that's natural to us. But yeah, not being able to react, having the power to take that breath, I think is what really is the key to empowering masculinity. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I've recently been stepping more into a kind of healthy masculinity, because growing up, when my dad would get angry and throw things or break something, I was always so scared to be that guy that I kind of would shrink away from any kind of conflict or anything like that, just to avoid, repeating that cycle. And what I've found is one of the things that's been helpful is setting boundaries, like just being able to say, I'm uncomfortable with this, we need to pause, or, that's been helpful with the self-control aspect of it, rather than to just kind of go along with things that I disagree with or feel uncomfortable with, and then all of a sudden blow up over something tiny. That was the pattern I saw with my dad. He would go along with things, and then over something that seemed insignificant, he would have a fit. And what's been helping me anyway, stepping into a kind of healthier masculinity, has been boundaries, setting boundaries, and just saying, like, when you do this makes me uncomfortable, and just saying it in a calm, respectful way. And then having, coping skills that kind of go along with that, to say, this is something we need to address and talk about, especially in a relationship, any kind of relationship, really, friendship, romantic relationship, whatever. Boundaries have been huge for me in being able, and being strong about it, just saying, I'm not trying to be a jerk. It's because I want to protect our relationship that I want to set this boundary, So that's been huge for me. I don't know if anybody else has experienced, good, healthy boundary setting as being an aspect of healthy masculinity, but for me, it has been. So
when I look at the fact that we talk about the masculine and the feminine, but there's also the masculine energy and the feminine energy. If we just seem to look at both, just take one title and give it to everything. The thing is that, you imagine a man who can't pick up a child. Well, every man, to start with, they want to see that look of love, that look of admiration in their children's eyes. That's part of what we want to feel. So we have to, and part of that comes back to not just a masculine energy, but also a feminine energy. For a man to be fully at his total power, he has to have a balance of both within himself. The same as women need to have that as well in themselves. And then we have our masculine attributes and our feminine attributes. Women have the feminine attributes, men have the male attributes, but in all of us, we have that masculine and feminine energy. There's having a balance between that, knowing when to be which one. Because if all you can do is be that, John Wayne tough character, and I know in all of his movies, 400 odd movies that he did, we never saw a softer side of him. But even whenever he had to go into that role, he was useless. And that's where a lot of men are going. These ones who just want to be warriors and be tough and fight and all the rest of it, they're missing half their side of their nature, and they're not measuring up. And it's not a matter of, being the warrior and being out in front and charging and everything else, because leaders come from all levels. Some are in front, some are in the middle, and some are behind the people, guiding them. It all depends on your personalities, how we actually do things. But there's no way of just saying this is a description of a man or a masculine or whatever. It varies from person to person. It interacts with our particular personalities as well. Sorry, Andrew, you were going to say?
Oh, no. Pardon me. I totally agree, Alan. And I want to kind of go to what Joey and David said. Thank you for your input. Like my father, so I was adopted, and I don't know anything of my biological father from Colombia, South America. I came here when I was 11 months old. But my adoptive father, he served in the army. So you think he was this rigid disciplinarian, have that stigmatized warrior mentality. And my father was complete opposite. He is the most optimistic man you will meet to this day, has nothing negative to say about anybody. And the world could be ending, and he'd be like, hey, we're all together. It's all fun. And so I got that softer side, but my personality trait is that myriad of my 7 cousins, like you said, the aggressive one, Joey, that you were talking about, just reaction mode, constant reaction, no response. David, as you said, that you didn't have that teaching of how to handle your emotions, and Alan, that balance that you were talking about. And so I do see it depends on the environment that you're about, what you're comfortable in your own skin. And then, like you said in the beginning, Alan, it's that ego of, okay, well, do I follow my heart? Do I follow what the world tells me? Do I follow what my intuition from that flight and response mode? And I think what we really have to bring into our society, into our community, is that reminding, as Alan said, that balance. Men and women both have a masculine and feminine side. I've been told several times all throughout my life, I was always considered just one of the guys. And for me as a woman and as a female, it was difficult to get into relationships with males because I had that confidence driven. I had that speak your voice and be prideful of who you are. And to some individuals, that was intimidating. And then when you have the stigma of men saying, oh, well, if he's emotional, he just lost somebody, there always has to be an attachment to it, when in reality, we have to realize as human beings, we all have those components. We all have the book of life. It's what chapter are you hanging on to? Are you ready to turn the page, or are you stuck in that chapter? And what we must be mindful is too, especially when we look in the workforce for men, our role models. Men can't be, it was stigmatized for a long time about men being in the nursing field, men being in the kitchen, and unless they were chefs, and men being in different dynamics. And we just have to stop thinking and putting individuals in compartments, into labels, into categories, and just find their passions and allow them, going back to the very, very beginning, find the empowerment within, encourage the fellow men to live out with passion and do what you love. And it's all done from experience, the good, the bad, and the different.
I agree. I totally agree.
There, Andrea.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We saying something, Joey?
The environment plays such a huge role in who we become as men or women. But I always turn back to the basic fundamentals that we have 4 billion years of evolution in our bodies that have told us and made us masculine, feminine. And I think the whole thing is we're just trying to figure out how to bring that balance, like Alan talks about. It's like we are genetically DNA programmed to act masculine or feminine. It's finding that happy medium. And I've always been really good. I should say, I've been very emotional my entire life, which wasn't a good thing for me because it allowed me to be erratic and irrational. But as I learned that power of control, learned that that emotion was really my empathy that I had. It was that I'm very in touch with my feminine side. I'm almost, I'd say 50-50 at times, but it's learning that empathetic side, that emotional side has so much power. That is the beauty of the feminine. And when we can harness that as the masculine, taking that into those passions that we do, taking that into the leadership role that the masculine portrays, it's the idea that you can harness that emotion, but stay in control of it. But yeah, the environment is playing a huge role on it, but I think we can't disregard the DNA. We can't disregard our biology, even though they claim nowadays that there's 100 different genders and whatever nonsense. We have to recognize what our biological DNA is, and then learn how to balance it with the other side. I guess is what I'm getting at.
Yeah. You have to come from a place of where we understand ourselves first of all before we can do anything else. And the thing is as well, why there's so many clashes is because we focus on the differences that we have, and that comes from a place of what do you call it, lack of understanding. But would I be right in saying I believe that every man and every woman on the planet have a common thread, and that is that we want to feel that we belong, that we contribute, that we're valued.
Yeah.
So if we start with these similarities, the things that we have common, then we can embrace the differences and accept those in other people. That allows us very quickly to be able to deal with our own emotions. And it's a case of, well, David, you said before that you said to your partner, when you do this, I feel this way. Well, even changing that slightly to saying, well, I feel this way when you did such and such, but not that you made me feel that way. This is the whole thing, is when you say, you even use the word, well, when you did such and such, it made me feel this way. No, if we change that to, when you did that, I felt this way, what you're not saying that you made me, it's a case of saying, well, I chose.
Responsibility.
When you take that own responsibility for yourself, because as soon as you challenge somebody and say, you made me feel this way, the barriers are going to go up straight away because they didn't deliberately do that. They were just responding emotionally to the situation.
Exactly.
And
I appreciate that.
We're going to judge them on that. We have no right to judge them on that when we want them not to judge us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's where the point scoring comes in.
I recognize too that sometimes, when we do feel a certain way based on someone else's actions, many times we're coming from our own triggers and our own traumas and things like that. So yeah, it's not that they made me feel that way. It could be, that things that happened before I ever even met this person is what's really making me feel this way when someone's acting in good faith and doing something that is not intended to hurt me. I can feel that way based on the trauma that I've experienced in the past, So that's a very good point. I appreciate it.
Yeah. There was a comment earlier from Richard surrounding triggers as well. So I'll just put it up as well if I can. Yeah.
And we have to be mindful. Oh, I'm sorry, Alan.
I was just going to say there are 4 things to remember when we look at people. Everybody is suffering or has suffered. Everybody wears a mask. Everybody pretends they're not wearing a mask, and that includes all of us. And we're also a combination of how we've decided to respond, or how we've chosen to respond to all the events in our life. When we realize that, we know that none of us are perfect, and we can look at everybody with a bit more compassion, because first of all, giving ourselves compassion to start with.
Absolutely. And I agree that we are not we don't have the right or the role to judge others, based on we don't know where their experiences are. And one thing I'd like to bring to the surface, kind of dating myself here, but the Disney movie of Mary Poppins, and it talks about, George Banks. He was supposed to be the breadwinner. He was supposed to be the disciplinarian.
Yes.
He was supposed to be the individual that took care of his family. No questions, no arguments, no excuses. And what I loved, for spoiler alert, pardon everyone if you haven't seen it, but it's an old movie, so you should have seen it. But anyways, it talks about at the end how Mary Poppins brings to, wasn't Mary Poppins, my mistake. It was Bert, played by Dick Van Dyke, who said, well, who's there to take care of your father? Who's there for him to put his head on their shoulder? Who's there who's him to wipe away his tears, wipe away his worries? It was right after the exchange where the kids go awry in the whole bank scene and what have you. And they run into Bert. He's like a jack of all trades, if you will. And he says, well, who's there to take care of your father? And I'll never forget that because, like I said, my father was elite banker on Wall Street. And I still get emotional thinking about that statement. Like, who's there for them? Who's there for these men that have no one to turn to because they're the CEO, they're the VP, they're the father, they're the big brother, they're the, after their father passes, they're the next man in the line. And I really think that we should really take ownership and a heightened awareness, if you will. Who's taking care of the men in your family? And are you being brave enough and bold enough to ask for help, ask for support without being judged, without being ridiculed, without being stigmatized? So the audience, I really want you to take ownership. And if you haven't seen that movie's a great movie, but that segment really resonated with me for years on end, even to this day. Who's taking care of the strongest man in your life? Because what happens when fade to black or when he's by himself? I think we really need to take ownership in that. And going back to what all the gentlemen said on the panel, going back to their experiences, their childhood experiences, their lineage, their ancestral or their generation, what they call curse, if you will. I hate saying that, but the repetitive behaviors and mannerisms that just continue from generation to generation. Back to you guys.
Yeah, well, see, in the Campfire Project, even beyond having total equality between all the genders, religions and cultures, one of the things I wanted to do is get all the different men and women who are running their own groups to come in, tell their story so we could then share their groups to the world. Because once you come in, tell your story, people know who you are, etc. And we would then promote them. But I also had ulterior motives to get them into panel discussions together with each other, because we knew that anybody who's running a group, like a CEO who's running his own company and things like that, who do they turn to when they go through stress? And guaranteed they're going to go through a lot of stress because they're going to hear everybody else's problems, plus they've got their own as well. And so, we're helping people in our groups and everything else, but who looks after us? But by bringing those people in to get to know each other, now they've got peer support, somebody they can ring and call. All the men have got at the moment is go down the pub with their mates. But their mates aren't trained in doing anything in this particular area. But if we, through our conversations, we actually educate ourselves to be more supportive of each other, then we've got that support. Then we can answer that question you asked there, Andrea, who looks after the men? We can. This is why having the best friends around you, the ones who agree with you every time you want to complain, are not your best friends. The ones that will pull you up on it or point out that, hey, have you thought about looking at it this way? If I listen to somebody, if I don't know, if I haven't been through something, I can ask them, well, I haven't been through it, but how would this be? And I give my ideas and ask them what their thoughts would be. If I've been through something, then I can go through the feel, felt, found process where I know how you feel because I felt the same way. But what I found was this is what I actually did. So you can then guide each other, and then we can have mature conversations instead of over a beer, whinging and carrying on about things and talking rubbish, just to try and feel better. Because men will go and have those conversations, where if women don't feel happy, they'll go and buy a new dress or new shoes or something else. So it's a case of, we've got different ways of handling it.
Self-medication in some sort of form.
That's it.
So my question to all then is, when do you think the conversation surrounding self-emotion should begin?
Now.
At what age?
Yesterday.
Yeah. It doesn't matter. For any age, it's now. For a father to be able to sit there and talk to his son and open up and show his heart and everything else, you watch your son's eyes. You'll see the pride, the love, and everything else coming back from them, because you're showing them the pathway that they don't have to be tough. They don't have to be, always taking it on and carrying all the weight. Because I think it was.
I was just trying to trigger the education system to you, Alan.
Yeah, I know. We can look at the education system, and don't get me started on it. You know what I'm like when it comes to the education system.
I do.
But
education starts at home, Alan.
It comes right back to how we behave from the moment the child's born.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? And even before that, really, it should be a case of how does a man respond even before he knows his wife is pregnant? Because there's the thing that grabs me and really gets me going is that when you look at the chemicals that go through our body at the 7-week age in the womb, the boy gets hit with so much testosterone, equal to what it is at puberty. This is where the wiring of the brain is established, the masculine or feminine side of the brain. And that's at the 7-week mark. Now, if the mother is feeling unhappy, she's, got to defend herself, look after herself while her husband is being aggressive or whatever, he's more likely to have a feminine brain. A child is more likely to have a feminine brain. So therefore, the guy who wants a masculine son, you better get soft and look after and be very loving to your wife before she falls pregnant, so she's in the right mood to create the right chemicals to get that masculine brain in the child.
Yeah. Welcome, Robert. Oh, he's gone.
And that goes back
I must have scared him off.
That goes back to a post that I always post on Father's Day. A man says, a boy. Now I just went out of my head. See, this is what happens. It's something along like a son walks in a father's shoes, and the father said, I gotta find it. I will find it. But in other words, the gist of it is be careful where you walk because your son is following in your footsteps. And it goes back to what Alan's saying about how he treats his wife, how he treats his mother, how he treats his friends. Our children, we are our number one coaches for our children from the get-go. And whether we know it or not, subconsciously or unconsciously, they're observing every single moment. And when we don't think they are, they're learning a lot faster than we are.
Yeah. Welcome, Robert.
Moment, body language and so forth. So, yeah, I'll find the post.
Yeah.
How are you, Robert?
Well, feeling a bit out in the twilight zone, but pretty good otherwise. Well fed.
Okay. Do you have any input surrounding self-empowerment in men?
Servitude, like service to your friends, being of service to your friends consistently over a long period of time, in a way that provides value. Not like a servant, but of service. So doing something that there's value in. So you're creating value. You're not charging for it. You're just doing it because, like the way I used to do open air hangouts every night, 7 days a week. Confidence sort of snuck up on me after about 7 months. It snuck up on me right at the best possible moment when I was in the boss's office at work, and they wanted me to take responsibility for anything that might possibly happen that was beyond my control because I hit a signal. And I said, I think I need a lawyer to understand this form properly, and if you'll provide one and I understand it, then I'll decide if I want to sign it or not. And I was the first one to not sign that form, and the union guy was happy. And then I left. Not directly. They kind of changed the date I booked off, and that's a long story. It's not concluded yet. I thought it was. I was wrong. And I suffer from excessive context disease. My apologies. I invented that, so I can say that. I love context.
Is that what we're all doing now? We're just self-diagnosing ourselves?
Why not?
Yeah.
Oh, I invented excessive context disease quite some time ago.
Okay.
Yeah, I like the fact that Robert brought up serving and not being a servant. I hate the title, a servant leader. There's nothing more ridiculous than I've ever heard. But a serving leader is different to a servant leader. A servant leader is somebody who is not going to be a great leader because nobody wants to be a servant, but to serve. It's not being a servant, it's the act that you're doing. I prefer to refer to people as being a serving leader, not a servant leader. So I think we've got to be careful about the words that we use. And I'm glad that Robert brought that one up.
Thank you, Alan.
Thanks, Robert.
I remember how excited I was the first time Alan made a friend request. I mean, I was really excited. That I knew who Alan was, I'm not sure how I knew that, But I was sure fired up, and that was a long time ago.
It was.
I was telling everybody, and people are like, who's that? Who's that? And I just take it, oh, they don't know. But I told them all. Excessive context.
Yeah.
You stand still long
Anything
enough.
to add, Joey?
Tell you everything I have to tell you, and then I'll tell you more, because I'll look it up as I'm telling you. Until I lose my voice. I promise.
Yeah, what do you think, Joey?
Yeah, I couldn't hear a lot of what Robert was talking about because I was getting such intermittent connection here. But I wanted to go back real quick to the idea of, teaching our children at an early age. I've got a 15-year-old and a 13-year-old son, and I've always, since the day they were born, I've tried to model just the pure love that I have for them in everything I do, and know it, they see it. I'm always the dad, even when I'm dropping the 15-year-old off at high school. It's like, you better give me a hug. You better tell me you love, I'm expecting it, but it's like, I'm the guy that's always there. Like, I'm hugging them. I'm telling them I love them, and just building them up and propping them up to the point, I still put them, go in at night before bed and kiss them good night, tell them how much I love them, and just those special moments that I get to have with them. I'm not afraid as a masculine to show that love, to give them that love that way. And I see it in everything they do with their friends and how they interact with everybody. They've just grown into that. And, it wasn't all me. Their mom had a lot to do with it as well, of course. But I found it so rewarding to share that love and to not be afraid of it, to not act like I have to be this masculine, tough guy. They know I'm tough. They know I don't mess around. But at the same time, they can come to me with anything. I'm always there for them. And I just love them to pieces, and they know that. And I think that's one of the biggest things we can do for our children is just be there and just love them like there's no tomorrow. And don't be afraid to show emotion. Don't be afraid to cry when you need to cry. That helps them open up to that empathy that I was talking about earlier that is so powerful.
See, I think a lot of fathers want to feel like have their children feel that they're perfect. They've got everything. Everything's fine. The trouble is, though, if we don't show them that we're vulnerable, that we're not perfect, we're setting them up for failure because they feel that they've got to be perfect, and nobody's going to be perfect. They're learning from people who aren't perfect. They're learning from us. And so once we show that they don't have to be perfect, but then it takes the pressure off them. They can be vulnerable, which means then they can open up and they can share and they can talk. We went through generation after generation after generation, teaching men to be tough and all the rest of it, to be warriors. So when anybody says, wants to go away for a warriors weekend, I'm not interested. Go away for a weekend where we're going to talk and discuss and open up and share our stories. And not just for the sake of whining about things, but to work through things, to get support from each other and support each other, support backwards as well. Then I'm happy I'll go along to that because I want to experience all aspects of me so that I can be the best version of myself. I can't be the best version of myself if I'm only trying to be this. I'm not trying to be that as well.
I agree. I totally agree because obviously with me, we have had the week of hell with our 11-year-old son. Because obviously he goes to an independent high school, so he's mixing around with 15 and 16-year-olds. So he's got that ego now, and he's literally full blown meltdown after meltdown. Like we had a couple of them yesterday. One before school, one after school. And he was calling me all names under the sun, you name it. And today, after I gave him that little bit of space, obviously I was still observing him, but from a distance, so I knew I was keeping him safe. But we kept a little bit of space. And today he actually told me he loved me for the first time in over 3 months. So it's like, who is this child?
But when you got that, when he said that, how did you feel?
Honestly, I couldn't respond. I didn't know what to do because I was in literal shock. But I did give him a hug, though.
That's good.
Yeah, I think that was the best I could do.
That sort of happened to me too, but it wasn't child because I hadn't had any children. It was Hexicans. I appeared on a Hexican live stream, Thoughts Child stream, and they proceeded to tell me how much they love my comments. They always go back and read them. They think they're very beautifully written, and I appreciate them because I've been doing my thing for several years, and I never expected to hear that because I don't need to hear that. But it was really nice, and I was kind of, they're saying the things I say about other people, but to me, I didn't know what to say, so I had to. It was the nicest thing anyone ever did for me.
And I think that goes back to what Alan said in the beginning, Robert. He said the lineage of humanity, if you will, is we just want to be loved. We want to be understood and respected. And the more we can provide that to men and say, hey, let's have a talk without alcohol involved, as Alan said, or without the sports TV on, without distractions. Let's just, one of the most uplifting experiences I've seen amongst families is when they go on a hike. There's no distractions. There's no cell phone service. You're in the present. You're in the moment. But something also about nature bringing it out too. I mean, think about our ancestors. Think about where we all came from. You know, it's just that camaraderie of respect, effective listening, and effective communication. And I think that is where I'll give a mark for the ladies. As a woman, one of the things we want, as several of you have mentioned before, is we just want to talk. Yeah. And a lot of men don't want to do that because, oh, what does she expect? Where are we going with this? What does she want? What does she need? What, you know, here she goes nag, or it reminds them of their mother. Here we go nagging. But when you have that open communication in any relationship, hey, look, today I just really want to talk. This is how I'm feeling. And using the vocabulary, as I said, words are wisdom or weapons. And using the vocabulary, I feel I would like, can we talk about this? And it's not so much to set up for the men to put them, paint them in a corner, if you will. But women need to talk about their emotions. You know, we saw a YouTube segment, just a side note, is if you can understand any female in your life, like environment, and how their cycle is, you'll know how to communicate with them because of the different science behind it, the psychology, and just the nature of their menstrual cycle at any age. And I saw a YouTube video on this. Her name's Mindy Paltz, if you want to check it out. And it really showed when you share that with any man in your relationship, but your father, your spouse, your brother, your cousin, or even people in your home, hey, this is the 4 stages. This is where I'm going to be at here. This is where I'm going to be at there. It's actually beneficial for both because it's open communication and understanding, but there is a science behind it.
Yeah. I always say to people, if you're having you want to really understand somebody, just remember you got 2 eyes, 2 ears, and 1 mouth, and use them in that proportion. But when instead of just talking, use it to ask questions. Ask every possible question you can, and then ask 1 more. It's very simple to ask that 1 extra question, which is after the person has answered all the questions you've asked, it's a case of, well, this is what I'm hearing. This is how I'm understanding it. Have I got it right? That's a simple question to ask. Anybody can remember that one. In that, if you have got it right, the other person knows that you've been listening, that you really wanted to know the answers. But if you haven't got it right, now you're into a deeper conversation. It's even a bigger win than if you did get it right the first time. That's when the conversation really starts. And it's talking about, well, this is about how I want to feel. Not that you made me feel this way or anything like that, but this is how I would like to feel, and have those sort of conversations. At that level, men will be able to respond. But if the woman is just talking about her feelings and everything else, and realizing that men don't feel uncomfortable in the emotions because we're too highly emotional, but we don't know how to express it. It puts us under pressure.
Yeah.
That's where some of the problem comes from. So when you realize that, then the man can actually open up when you have that discussion. It's a softer way of approaching it, because at the end of the day, if you want a result, you have to find the best way to get that result. You have to tune your transmitter into the other person's receiver to get your message across. So you have to talk in a way in which they need. So the more you understand each other's personalities, the more you can then have that deeper conversation, get to the results you're after faster, or more to the point, in the appropriate time it's going to take. Some people's personalities, it'll be quick, and the others will be slower. But if you take the wrong approach to it, you're never going to get there.
Right.
And if you,
Exactly. And this is what I mean. Obviously, I'll go to David in a minute, but I've seen many posts on Facebook today, basically saying, what advice would you give this, or what advice would you like that? And I've always commented saying, I hate the word advice. I know hate is a really broad word, but advice, when you're giving advice to someone, you're not there to, and this is what Alan's got stuck in my brain. So thanks, Alan, that if you're giving advice, you're not there to actually help them. You're basically sitting there to tell them what to do. And it's like, why?
You know, the standard time, if somebody starts talking about their problems, the research has shown the time it takes before somebody jumps in and gives advice is 19 seconds. How much information can you actually achieve in 19 seconds to give any response back of any validity, of any value at all in 19 seconds? You can't. This is why you listening more and understanding the other person. By doing that, it slows our emotions down and we don't get emotionally caught up in it. But because it's only taking us 19 seconds, this is why there are so many fights on Facebook. As soon as somebody says something, people take sides straight away. Instead of
which goes back to ego.
Where's this coming from? Why was that said? What were the things that led to it? I think it was David said before that, you know, there was all the pressures, and then all of a sudden over something trivial, there was the reaction, the straw that broke the camel's back. Well, what were all the other things that happened before that for that to happen in that moment?
Yeah. Adam couldn't wait the 19 seconds.
She's bullying me again, guys. I'm joking.
I'm sorry?
I found this is one of my biggest struggles that I'm continually, this is one of the biggest struggles I have that I continually work on, is that listening and understanding. Because like Alan said earlier, you know, women, 90% of what they're saying, they just want to share their feelings, their emotions. They want to get out whatever's within them. And I've learned it takes that patience, because as the masculine, we want to fix them. We want to help them. It's like, what's their problem? Diagnose it as quick as we can to give them that solution. And 90% of the time, they don't want a freaking peep out of us. They just want us to shut up and engage and make them feel like they're being heard. And to go along with Andrea, I've got
I can resonate with that.
I practice.
Okay.
Keep track
a
of
little
the
bit.
cycles. Got it for you.
Oh, hold on. We're getting a little conflict.
We've,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
kept track of our cycles now we've kept track of her cycles now going on for a few years, and it's made a world of difference in our relationship, just because I now know the week prior, I don't step on toes, because I know what's coming. I know what she's going through, and she's an emotional just train wreck, more or less, you know, leading up to it. So it's that having that empathy, but being able to shut up and listen, like Alan's talking about, has made such a difference in our relationship.
Yeah.
And
it's also too difficult as women, because we're in this flight or fight mode of a damsel in distress, or save me, woe is me, or forget it, I'll do it myself. There's no balance at times for us. So it's like, hey, can you come here? I got you. Can you fix this? And then if you take like 3 seconds longer than you're supposed to, forget it, I'll just do it myself. I should have done this. So it's going back to all of those, you know, what Joey said, DNA, Alan said, of understanding our, you know, our reaction mode, our, sensory, effective listening, effective communication, what Robert says, not putting it into, a particular situation, and David being mindful of your environment. It's all myriad of what we're all talking about here. And we're made, I guess, if you could say, I have to be careful with my words, but we are here to complement each other, whether it's man, woman, 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 man, man, or whatever. And once we have a better understanding of where we fit in that puzzle in any of our relationships, knowing our audience, will have a better communication and listening relationship, because I think that's what it really comes down to. But all in all, I just feel that the men don't have much to turn to, whether it's ego, shame, or hey man, I want to, like I said, you always, hey, let's go to the pub, let's just talk it out. No, let's sit down, let the women go, and let's just have a chat by the fireplace, or a fire pit outside, like you said, the campgrounds. I think there has to be more unity for men than women, because I feel women, and I'm going to get smashed again, but I feel women are more cliquish, or, oh, wow, let's talk about this. That I was never raised that, but I think we need to advocate and support our men to really put our shoulder on one another. And
we look at the cycles that we go through as we grow up. All children from the age of, we just use general figures here, from the age of 0 to 7, boys and girls are nurtured by their mother. They're looked after at that level. If we look at tribal times, the father would be out hunting. His job was to be the hunter. The mother's job was to be the gatherer, gathering food that they ate more than anything else, and gathering the kids together so they weren't getting lost and all the rest of it. The end result, then, at the age of 7, the girls would go off to the aunties. The boys would finally go to granddad and dad and start to get that understanding of what it's going to be like when they go through their rite of passage. So at the age of 14, the boys would go through their rite of passage, and that's when they'd be with the other men. The girls at the age of 14 were now with the wise women. So by the time they were 21, where they can become mothers, that they were fully equipped. The boys, by the age of 21, had now gone off to the wise men, because the next 7 years to the age of 28 is where they really had the ability then to understand what it was to be a father. So that by the time they were 28 and their sons were now 7, they could take that role on. So these were the cycles we went through. So boys always matured slower than girls. They had to. Otherwise, if they matured at the same rate, there was going to be a 7-year cycle where they had idle hands. And we know what happens when you have idle hands. You have problems. And so once we realize that, so we don't have a rite of passage for the boys today generally. The bar mitzvahs for the boys in the Jewish community, yes. Tribal stuff, yes. But for most Caucasians all around the world, we don't have those rites of passage. So the boys are lost. And yes, by the time they become teenagers, they're going to be vocal and all the rest of it. They're going to be carrying on because they're jockeying for position of who's their masculinity, who are they, their identity. This is why they need other men around them then to say, okay, now you got your identity. Now let's use it appropriately. And they didn't, we're not getting that guidance. So if we don't get the guidance, when David and Joey were saying as youngsters, we didn't get that guidance. Our fathers didn't get that guidance. So now we're trying to change an education system that we've had, not just education in the sense that Adam is thinking of with school, but education from our families. Of our fathers. We didn't have it. And so we've got to re-educate ourselves. And this is why men have to come together, support each other, knowing that we're into a battle here of changing our hard wiring that we've had through generations. Now we can be warriors. We come together as warriors to break that old cycle. And in doing that, we have to become gentler. The warrior has to become gentler in the process to get there.
Yeah. Gentle giant.
Any feedback, David?
Well, one of the things that Joey was saying earlier about, loving the kids, like just modeling that love, that like compassion and healthy masculine sensitivity, even just being empathetic towards your kids and like, listening to them and when, they're going through something. I was always kind of brought up to kind of act like boys don't cry, you know.
Hmm.
And I have 2 boys, and they both can cry, you know, and they feel okay about it. And I feel like that's kind of a win on my part, that my kids did see me cry sometimes. I saw my dad cry maybe once in my entire life. And I was just having a conversation with a male friend just yesterday, I think it was actually, and I was relating a very emotional story, and I broke down and cried, and I even had that moment where I was like, "Oh, this is embarrassing," but I said, "No, you know, I'm a human being. I have emotions. Just because I'm a man doesn't mean that I can't express them through tears sometimes." And it was, you know, it was a powerful feeling that I was feeling, and my words weren't quite able to keep up with how I was feeling, and then the tears came, and you know, I had to fight back that little bit of embarrassment, you know, just like, oh, he's gonna think I'm, you know, weak, or you know, too feminine or something like that. But he responded really well. He was like, dude, it's okay, you know, like that's the emotional thing you're talking about. And we had a male bonding moment, I would say, where I think our relationship got stronger, you know, through that, just being able to share my emotions in a healthy way. And you know, I wasn't, you know, I felt embarrassed at first, and then his, you know, kind of response made me feel like, you know, this is okay. This guy understands, you know, he understands that I'm expressing a powerful emotion and that it's okay to cry. And you know, I acknowledged that to him. I was like, thanks, man, for not making me feel, you know, like a sissy or whatever, that I was, you know, able to express that in front of you. And I really value that in male companionship, when you can share emotions and share uncomfortable things and have that kind of a positive response. So, you know, it was really a powerful moment for me.
And I think, yeah, thank you for sharing. I think it's important too, like Alan and Joey, Rob, all of you mentioned, don't forget we're working on years, if not decades, or you know, a timeline where we have been programmed that men should act a certain way. And I think the more we speak about it, the more we heighten the awareness. And like I said, that camaraderie, the more groups out there for males. You know, I know in the religious factor, they have men's cornerstone. In other factors, they have campgrounds. In other factors, they have, you know, different groups. You know, I know one of my family members goes to a hobbyist, where it's all men who are widowed or lost a child. And they do everything together, but the power of the emotions is allowing people to heal. You must feel in order to heal. And I think that's really the underlying thread. We're all human. And I'm so grateful, David, that you had that experience. It's really important. And I wish a lot of the audience that's watching can learn from that and emulate that.
Yeah.
You know,
Right.
so I've
I
been
want to.
loving the conversation and that, but I've got an appointment that I've got to get to, so I'm going to have to love you and leave you. And I'll be coming back to the recording later on to listen to what you guys have got to say, because, as I said, I've been loving the whole conversation. So thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
You're most welcome.
Nice meeting you, Alan. Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Right. So, yeah, I don't know what to say. I don't know what to say because of how powerful this conversation actually is. Because we're all learning something.
I'm actually going to have to sign off too. I was muted when Alan was leaving, but I have to sign off as well. But
yeah, we hit the mark. We hit the mark, Adam, right?
Yeah, we do. Yeah, everyone's just leaving you. I'm joking.
Sorry. But thank you again. This has been wonderful.
Yeah.
You're most welcome.
Nice meeting you, David. Thank you.
Nice to meet you too, Andrea.
Yeah. Spend more time with you next time, David.
Yeah.
Once I know what's going on.
Next.
I'm in an apartment right now. So.
Yeah. So, any final words, Joey?
Yeah, you know, just hearing everybody talk today, it really it reminds me that as masculine, we need to not be afraid to be vulnerable. We have to allow ourselves the ability to cry, allow ourselves to show weakness, because that's only going to make us stronger. But it goes back to what I said earlier, is kind of harnessing that power of self-control. Know when it's appropriate to let your emotions out. Know when it's appropriate to be vulnerable, but also we have to know when it's appropriate not to, I guess. But yeah, don't be afraid to cry. I'm a crier, and I admit it, and I embrace it, because that's part of who I am. That's the love within me. So that's my parting words, I guess.
Absolutely.
Excellent. What about you, Robert?
Well, I've always kind of had to let the emotions out. It didn't stop me from doing anything or defending myself, as some people found out. So, he's crying, we'll beat him up. No, you won't. You'll lose. But that's why I also went into weightlifting now, hardcore, to be a deterrent to that. So when the old bullies would get drunk, then they wanted to be my buddy, which is fine. I understand that. That's why I love Alan's work, because he's trying to defeat bullying right at the start, or even before. And
Exactly.
That's a big
Yeah. Right. I think I should wrap up.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for your input, Robert.
Oh,
Absolutely. Well, for everyone's input.
That's
Yeah. Right. Who have I got next week? We've got the soulmate coaches, Andrea.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, we've got a dynamic couple who brand themselves soulmate coaches, talking about how to reconnect with yourself. So that's back at 8 p.m. UK. So yeah, we'll go from that.
Is there a reason
thanks to everyone. What's that?
I was going to say, is there a reason I feel extra warm right now? But probably because the window's closed and the heat pump is turned off.
You're in Canada.
Warm here.
Canada's always warm.
Well, no. Well, it's not as cold as it used to be in the winter. I miss that. But
Yeah.
I don't have
fires.
Okay.
All right. So on that note, a pleasure meeting both you gentlemen, and I'll turn it over to you, Aladdin, Adam, and Alan. Close out the show.
I was waiting for that. Right. I'm going to love you and leave you. Please tune in next week and we'll kick ass once again. And yeah, thanks to everyone tuned in, everyone being on the panel. I love you all and see you later.
Right back at you.